don't understand it. You're changing, I can't stand it. My fault, can't save this damage.
With us, the last few videos, we talked about how to interact with arrays, how to mutate arrays, how to avoid mutating arrays, and even how to sort arrays. And I want to actually expand on that because I brought in this new data set. We don't really need to go into all the details of the data itself. So one thing that we're looking at, and I wanted to expand on sort, is we're looking at the dates over here. So currently, if we're looking at this like it's a blog post, we have users and we have posts, then chances are that if I open up a thread in our blog post application, then I want to have the posts sorted by date. There are other things that you can sort by, such as like Facebook uses like a relevancy one, which I have no idea what they're even considering relevant, but I guess it's what has the most upvotes and all that. So you could sort by like upvotes and things like that, but the usual default is to sort by date. And so currently none of these are actually sorted by anything. Even the IDs could change if I manually change them and mutate the array. And so we want to be able to sort it by date. And we're going to use the same thing that we did the last time when we brought in sort. So we can say post.sort. So there's one thing that I want to show you guys that I didn't get to show you the last time, but over here, once we do our sort and we get our little helper pop up over here, then we see that it returns an array. So this one will return an array if we do a for each and then hover over that. Then for each is going to return void, which basically means that it's not going to return anything. It's going to do a bunch of stuff to it. It's going to check the arguments, and then it's just going to basically change it, like mutate it, but it's not going to return anything. Now, if we do map and hover over that and then scroll down over here, then you see that it returns an array and it says any. So what any means is that it can be an array of anything. It can be an array of numbers mixed with strings, mixed with functions, objects, things like that. So not every language can do that. In fact, most other languages will yell at you if you try to put in like more than one type in there, or you would have to just mention that you want the type to be any. So it's kind of like a little cheat. So back to what we're going over here. So if you ever need to figure out if something returns something, just feel free to just hover over it and let the helper tell you, and then just read through that. Okay, so now we're going to sort. So the same thing as last time, we're going to use A and B. And then there's one thing that I want to show you. We actually can't just do a.date. It's greater than b.date, so we can't do that. And I'll show you why over here. I'm going to actually put this into a variable and say new post equals that, and then we're going to console log it. All right, so new post so that we could see it down here. So if we're looking at it, so it's sorted, just not appropriately. We still have 2019 over here, 2018. The dates are all jacked up. However, the one thing that you notice is that the first and second character here are sorted. So that's all that it cares about, because it's still looking at it as a string, and it's taking in the values of the characters that are in the string rather than the entire date as a whole. So what we're going to have to do is add something new. We're going to have to add the new date constructor. So a constructor, when you hear about that in JavaScript, is going to be a class that is basically built into JavaScript. So in this case, it would be something like, because we're going to use the date constructor, it would look like this. And then it would say, it would have a constructor method, which a constructor method just lets you build in the values of what is this class going to look like, what does it have in it, what attributes does it have. So in this case, it would take in a value, and now we have to define it. So we would say this.value equals value, and I'll go over the this keyword in a different video, but essentially all that this means is that this is within the scope of this particular class. So the value of this class is equal to the value that's being passed in by the user. So, and then there would be some methods down here. That basically take that value and do some cool things to it and returns it for you. But essentially, that's what a constructor looks like. And if you wanted to instantiate it, you would say like const my date equals new, and then say date. So you would basically call it like a function, but you would use the new keyword. And then if we hover over it, we'll see date constructor. So under the hood, that's basically what it would look like. Now, again, we would need to use that new date in order to let JavaScript know that it needs to parse it like a date. So if I hover over this, like I love doing, then we're going to see it says it enables basic storage and retrieval of dates and times. And then if you go over here, it says date constructor, and it tells you that it takes in a string, a number, or an actual date, and then it turns all of it into a date. So feel free to go into MDN and take a look at all of the cool stuff that you can do with that. There are a lot of things, but we're going to finish this off over here and then take a look at it, and we're going to bring this back up. And so if we're looking at the dates now, they're a little bit different. You no longer have the first one being the lowest number over here. Instead, what you do have is the year counting for whichever is the earliest one, and then you have the month, and then the date. So it takes the entire thing into account. So it returns back like appropriate what we would consider like to be the earliest dates. So that's cool. So now what I want to do is I want to go over how can we establish this relationship between this. So between these two data sets that we have. So if you're thinking about it in a way like Microsoft Excel, where Microsoft Excel uses tables and it uses rows and columns. So in this case, when we're thinking about our column, that would be our values. And then we have rows, which would be our fields or our properties. So columns would be the values, and then rows would be the fields or the properties. And so in relational databases, generally they link to each other based on something called a foreign key. So, and that's what this user ID would be. A foreign key is basically saying that the value in here is representing something foreign to it, something in another place. In this case, the value to the user ID, even though it's on this field, it's representing something that's on this field. It's representing this ID. So basically, we would be able to tie this post back to this user based on this value over here. So I want to be able to do that. I actually want to go through and return all of the posts, and I want to create a new object that would add a user field, which would return all of the details for that user for this post. So, and I think that that's pretty cool. So if you're thinking how I'm thinking, where I talked about returning a new object, then you're probably thinking about using something like map, which will let us add a new field, because one, we don't want to mutate this, and two, we don't want to, we do want to create a new field. So we don't want to manually have to put it in for each one of them. So what we're going to do is come back down here, and then we're going to say post. Actually, let's put this into a variable. So let's say const new posts equals posts dot map, and then we're just going to pass it in post because it's going to iterate through each one of these posts individually. And then we're going to put our little curly brackets. Again, if you wanted to do it a different way, you could do it like this. And then that would be kind of like explicitly saying that you're returning an object, and you can start putting in your fields. You could say field like this would equal like post.id and all of that. And, so it would be explicitly returning this object. However, just for readability, I don't generally like to do that because other developers who aren't familiar with your code might come in and take a look at that, and it's just not something that you immediately pick up with the eyes. So we explicitly just say that we want to return this object. I think that readability is very important, and even though it's more lines and all this other stuff, it's easier for you to just come in and see what it's doing. So we're going to use the spread operator here. And if you need a little bit more of understanding, first off, this is what the spread operator would look like. But let me just comment this out for a second and come down here. And so we're going to say that we have const array 1 equals, and then this is going to be 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to say const array 2 is equal to 4, 5, 6. And now we want to mix those two together. So we want to be able to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the way that we can do that is to say const array 3 equals, we just do little triple dots over here. So dot, dot, dot. That's informing JavaScript that we want to spread things in. And so we would say array 1, and then again, dot, dot, dot. And then we'll say array 2. And now let's console log it and take a look at what it is. So we'll say array 3. So there we go. So now we're looking at it and we see that it put them together. It said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if we get rid of 1 here, then basically it doesn't flatten the array. Instead, it just puts both of them in an array, because currently this is representing an array. So if we look into this, it says it's an array of numbers. And so because it's an array of numbers, then that means that it also thinks that you want to just put that array inside of this array. And so if you don't want to do that, then you would use the spread operator. So another way to do that would be to say array1 dot concat, and then we can say array2. So this is another way. This is the ES5 way of doing it. It does the same thing. In some cases, some people might think that this is more readable. In other cases, people prefer the spread operator. But essentially, if you're thinking about concatenating something, then that would be a good case for the spread operator. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, so we want to spread this in. And then the one cool thing that the spread operator lets you do is it lets you basically either change a field or in some cases even add a field. So now we want to add a field called user. And this is where we're going to build out our user that we want to include up there. And this is a very realistic situation that you're going to get certain data back from the API. Your backend developer may not want to create an entire new route just for the sake of giving you like an extra field how you want it. So they may want you to just get it from somewhere else and mix it in with where it belongs. So in this case, we're going to do work with my favorite one. We're going to say users.find. So find, and let's hover over like we've been doing before. We'll just go right over here. So find, it takes anything just like the last one, and what it does is it pretty much returns the value that you're looking for. So it says this argument and then any. So basically it takes whatever, and then if it finds it in there, then it's going to return the first item. So if you have like, if I'm looking for Sandra up here, and we have like 3 Sandras, it's only going to return the first one that it finds. So keep that in mind when you use it. Okay, so now we're going to say user, and then put our little arrow function, and then we're going to say user.id equals post.user ID. And then we're going to console log that and see what it returns. So it's going to look a little bit funny just because of the way that Quokka prints everything out. So you won't get to see everything in full detail. However, oh, there you go. So it actually is going to let us see everything in full detail. So if we're looking over here, we're looking at our post. So it has all of our stuff with our user ID, comment, date, and then the user is a new field that we just added. and it has our user's data for that particular user that posted it. So if we're looking at ID 1 of this user, it matches the user ID. If we scroll all the way down to the bottom and look at ID number 3, which is for Sandra, and that matches with user ID 3. So that's pretty cool. So one other thing that we can do is, what if I say that this is way too much data and I don't want to get every single post back like this? I would rather get it, just bring me back the users and then create a field where you shove all of those posts into that particular user. So in some cases that might be easier for you to render. So what we'll do is we'll just get rid of this here and get rid of that. And now we can do the same thing, but just slightly different. In this case, last time we went straight for the post. This time we're going into the users. And then we're going to say users.map again. And then pass in our user. And then do our return. And this time what we want to spread in is the user. And then create our new field, which is going to be post. Last time our field was users. So we're going to create our post, and then this time, instead of using our find method, what I want to use is filter. So, and then we'll take a look at that. So we'll say post.filter, and then we hover over that. Actually, we can see it right over here. So let's hover over it and take a look at the little reading over here. It says it returns the element of an array that meet the conditions specified in the callback function, and then it tells you what the parameters are over here. So first thing is going to be the callback function. So if I wanted to type this out manually somewhere out here just to extract it and then just call it down here, then I could. But basically it just returns the stuff that you're looking for and cuts everything else out. So it filters it out. So we can say post, and then just like find, we can use pretty much the same thing that we wrote for find. We can just say post.userid equals user.id. And then we can put this into a variable and call it const new users, because map creates a new array, and we have no other way to capture that new array except for putting it into a variable. And so we'll say console log new user, and so there we go. So now you're not going to really get to see it in details just because of how deeply nested it is and how Quokka parses everything. But essentially we have our user data, and then we have the post over here. So if I were to let's say open up a new here we go, hold on. If I were to open up a new thing here and add it to the screen, and then we can bring up the inspector, come over here, close all of this out, and then we could basically just take all of our data here and just do a copy all, and then bring it into the inspector and post it in here, and then just hit enter. So now we're getting our data back. We're getting our object over here. We have the very first object, which could be a little bit difficult to read, so I'm going to do that. And then we're going to open it up. That's our first user, and then we open our post, and then now we have all of the objects with all of the post data for that individual user, and you can see that it takes in user ID 1, goes to user ID 1. If we go to 2, then it's going to be the same thing for this one. It's going to be user ID 2, and then same thing for this one. So for the post, it's going to be user ID 3. So it's a very realistic scenario that at work you would have to, like once you're doing your developer job, that you would get data like this where you have to like sort out the date and then return that, the list of posts by that, or you would have to sort out a different thing like the title of a field or something. You would have to sort it by a string, or you would have to sort it by date or by number, or you would have to add an extra field. So there's a lot of cool stuff like that that you would have to do. And so it's very good thing to explore those values. So with that, That's going to be the end of this video. It's a little bit long already, but if you have any questions or comments, or if there's anything I didn't explain, feel free to put it down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Hey, thanks for watching this series. If it helped you out in any way, do me a favor and just like the video, subscribe, maybe even share it either on Twitter, Facebook, whatever. It'll help the channel out, and I'm going to be putting out some more videos in this series. So see you next time.